Awesome. Excellent. So, welcome everybody. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for taking your time to listen to this. This is one of many conversations that we will have with leaders in sustainability. The first one will be Marc Weiss. Thank you so much, Marc, for joining us and being part of this. Thank you for trusting in us to basically work with your vision of what sustainability should be in terms of cities and city development. Um, and yeah, I guess we're just gonna try to have a very informal sort of conversation. Just have you first talk about your, broader vision on the topic, how it came up to be, talk a little bit about the background for the CIS projects themselves, and then we'll just have a, sort of like an informal conversation, like we usually try to do. So, if you could please introduce yourself real quick, that would be great.
Okay. Well, first, I want to thank you, Jose, and you, Pepe, and your entire GUD ACTA team for the great work that you've been doing these past few years. It's a pleasure to work with you, and it's very exciting what you're doing. And congratulations for this event today, the first of many. And so I'm very happy to be here. I'm Marc Weiss. I'm the chairman and CEO of Global Urban Development, GUD. And we've been operating now for 19 years as part of tended to be a 30-year strategy to move the world from going in the wrong direction to going in the right direction. We are a very large global network of more than 700 leaders and experts in 60 countries. And we have committed, as we like to say, to enable all people everywhere in the world to live and thrive in peace with each other and in peace with nature through our focus on what we call sustainable innovation and inclusive prosperity. In other words, an economic agenda that's also a sustainability agenda that's innovative and inclusive. And so we do a lot of work at the high level, like with the UN and World Bank and international institutions, things like the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Climate Agreement, New Urban Agenda. And we also work on the ground in many cities and countries around the world. And, our most recent big project that we've been working on here in Porto Alegre, Brazil, and you guys have been working on in Panama City, Panama, is sustainable innovation zones.
Great. Thank you very much, Marc. Thank you everybody for watching. I think we can kick it off with maybe explaining a little bit more about what are sustainable innovation zones.
Okay. So as I mentioned, one of the, I've been working on promoting environmental sustainability since the late 1960s in California. And in the 1970s, one of the things that we saw was one of the biggest barriers, one of the biggest obstacles is what I call economic fear. That because through industrialization, and I grew up in Chicago, which is a very industrial city, a lot of the world got, created more jobs and more growth and wealth by ruining the environment, by abusing ecosystems and wasting resources. The problem is that when the environmental movement began, that I was involved in the 60s, people were afraid that if we got richer by ruining the environment, then when we say we have to protect the environment, and people thought, well, then that'll make them poorer. And so there was a lot of resistance. And we said we have to overcome that resistance by showing, as we say in GUD, that you get richer by becoming greener. That operating in greater harmony and balance with ecosystems, conserving and reusing natural resources much more efficiently. It doesn't cost you money, that saves you money. It actually grows businesses, jobs, and incomes. And the good news is that in California, from the 1970s till now, we really proved that the economy did get stronger by becoming greener, and it's a very now a mainstream point of view. Most people in California understand and believe in that's the way forward in the 21st century. So what GUD has done is we said, okay, we need to prove that point over and over again to everyone all over the world, not just as an idea, but that they would personally experience it. So what sustainable innovation zones are about is a sort of a concentrated effort, a high energy experiment as the leading edge of the change, to take an area of the city near universities, attracting a lot of enthusiastic entrepreneurial activity, a lot of brain power, and say, we're going to transform this place to be very sustainable in a way that generates new startups, new technologies, new products and services and ideas that will make the economy stronger as we get much more sustainable, as we reduce emissions and pollution and all of that. So that's what the idea is. The purpose of it is kind of build a network all over the world of these zones in urban communities that will change people's thinking, change their perspective on the future, enable them to work together in a real way. So it's not something gigantic like, we need to reduce emissions for the whole world. It's saying in our community, this is something that we can do working together with each other. We can contribute to it. We can see the impact of it. We can experience the benefits of it. And then that's how the ideas and the best practices spread.
That's great. I think what you mentioned about working with the community is very, very important. So maybe you can give us a little bit of an examples of what kind of activities, what kind of projects have you seen being developed in different places that kind of give a good example for what sustainable innovation zones can do.
Yeah, and let me just say that when we started GUD, we're do a lot of consulting work, usually with governments, and that was the case here. We came down to the state of Rio Grande do Sul, working with the state government, with the city government, with the federal government in Brasilia, with funding from the World Bank, and we did this, what we called the Leapfrog Economic Strategy, for Rio Grande do Sul to become the most sustainable and innovative state or province in Latin America by 2030. And the idea of doing sustainable innovation zones in Porto Alegre and all the other cities was a centerpiece of the strategy. But then, as often happens, the state government changed hands. So the idea that it would be done in a top-down way, that didn't happen. But what we were able to do, GUD working with the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, where I'm a visiting professor, with the city government, and most importantly, with lots of students, with lots of entrepreneurs and activists, with many, many people on a grassroots level. We said, we're going to show how ZISPOA, the Zonas de Innovación Sostenible de Porto Alegre, can work. And so our theme was a long journey begins with a single step. And it's all about taking action and producing results. So we, in addition to having all sorts of classes and seminars and festivals and lots of activities, we did things. We said we wanted to do electric car sharing. We got some entrepreneurs to build a solar electric car charging station. We built a solar post at the university where you could charge your phone or other devices while you're hanging out in the courtyard. We built a parklet to take away parking spaces, to have secure bike parking for people to hang out, also with a solar post. We're working on one of the university buildings, making it one of the greenest buildings in Brazil. And we promoted bike sharing both through a private startup and through the city program. We promoted recycling food waste and generated 2 new startups around that turn it into composting, and on and on. So there's a lot of ways in which people can work together with their own resources, their own people power, to get things done that show the way towards things that could be scaled up to be much larger and to really change things.
Yeah, definitely. And what has been the response of the communities?
Well, it was pretty great. And actually, that was the other thing, is that, when we did the Leapfrog strategy, which was now, we completed that in a little over 5 years ago. And at that time, people liked the idea, but they didn't really believe that it could happen, and now, 5 years later, things have changed, because the ZISPOA generated so much excitement, enthusiasm. We did, in the first course, within a month, we did this, the city government did this video about the course, and it went viral. It was like the most watched video ever that the city produced. A month after that, we got selected by the Swedish government to be, that they were going to help us. And so before you knew it, the word got around. Everybody was like, oh, ZISPOA is cool. And so starting from your generation, it kind of bubbled up. The students got the professors excited. Now we have this big group called ZISPROF, people got their parents excited that were, business leaders and government leaders and so on and so forth. So now it's, within 2 years, the city council officially recognized ZISPOA. And we're part of almost every policy activity that's happening. And even now the state government, the Secretary of Innovation, Science and Technology hired 2 people who are leaders of ZISPOA. And they're doing an initiative called Innova RS. That's kind of a version of the Leapfrog strategy, where sustainable innovation, which is a term that we kind of coined, that's now a centerpiece of people's thinking here, linking sustainability and innovation. We're introducing a new graduate program at the Federal University on sustainable innovation. So I think we've had a very big impact on people's view of what's possible in the future and wanting to support it. We have generated a lot of activity. Most of the things have had a small impact in terms of the number of jobs that have been created or the number of businesses and so forth. But it points the way towards a future where we believe we can succeed, just like what you guys are doing in Panama City.
Right. And so I want to add real quick. So could you say that basically the role of sustainable innovation zones is to push, on more than one front at the time, saying like, well, we're gonna give communities, the realization that there can be a real demand for these, greener strategies, more energy focused policies, etc. And at the same time, be talking to either companies, the public sector, etc., so that everybody is basically on the same page, right?
Yeah, and we picked these in the beginning. We picked these 5 goals to work on. Most solar powered, most energy efficient, most bike friendly, most, we called it renewable technology friendly, but it's a circular economy, including recycling and all that, and most digitally connected, which now in COVID, that was the one that we didn't work on, but now that's becoming important. But in any case, we've made advances in all those areas, and bike friendly and solar, and it became a way for people to connect and use this movement. For example, when they have this big public-private university partnership called Pacto Alegre, and they said, we want ZISPOA to be part of it. So almost everything that's happening now, when people think of sustainability, they think of ZISPOA as the kind of inspiration and model. So it's a catalyst to enable a lot more things to happen and bring a lot more people together.
Yeah, definitely. We have a couple questions here, and I think one that is really important that we can sort of start from there is,
Okay.
how do you define sustainability? I think that's a very good question just to discuss.
Well, we, I guess the resource efficiency is vital. In other words, that in terms of the use and reuse of natural resources, to focus on renewable resources and to focus on conservation and efficiency in their use in such a way that we're more in harmony and balance with the nature and ecosystems. So we can have it, and a big part of our approach is advanced, innovation and technology and entrepreneurship and startups. So, but that all of that technology is put in the service of having us thrive in ways that don't ruin the environment, that don't exceed, what are called the planetary boundaries, but enable us to continue to be healthy and to be safe and have sufficient resources, so that everyone can have prosperity and quality of life. So that's kind of the way we approach sustainability.
Mm-hmm. I think another question that really relates to that, and we can see right now that our economic models are based on growth, just constant growth. And maybe it's hard to visualize how sustainability and development, specifically economic development, can work hand in hand. And there are many challenges, of course, to realize that. So, what are the challenges that you see? How do these two models can work together, and how do you then overcome the challenges to make that work?
Right. Well, you want, if you think of what is the real purpose of having a good economy, it's for people to have, prosperity and quality of life. Like, in other words, to have enough to have a good livelihood and well-being for themselves and their loved ones, and that would apply to everyone, include everyone. Doesn't necessarily mean growth for growth's sake, especially when, if you look at this kind of how they count GDP, the more pollution you have, the more growth you have. The more people get sick, the more growth you have. So those are not necessarily things you want more of, right? But what we do, we have this model, we call it the 4 greens: green savings, green opportunities, green talent, and green places. And again, that goes all the way back to the work I did in California starting in the 1970s. It starts with green savings. So if you're conserving and reusing resources much more efficiently, especially renewable resources, that doesn't cost you money, it saves you money. It saves you a lot of money. You're reducing massive waste. So for example, in California, starting in the 1970s, because of the energy crisis, we put in stricter new standards of energy efficiency on all new appliances, like refrigerators and, you name it, on all new buildings, on all new motor vehicles. And the net effect of that between the mid 70s and now is that people in California collectively have saved well over $100 billion that they didn't spend on energy. It's what Amory Lovins used to call negawatts, not megawatts, but megawatts. The cheapest, easiest, fastest, safest energy is the energy that you don't use, right? So in California, people still have cars and they still have mobile phones and they have computers and they have everything. It didn't affect their quality of life or standard of living at all, but they saved a fortune spending less on energy to operate all of it and enjoy the benefits of all of that. So that's green savings. And green savings, then, here's the beautiful part of this virtuous cycle. In order to achieve the savings, you need new products, new services, new technologies. So that's green opportunities. That's sustainable innovation. That it means massive growth in businesses, jobs that are green. You know, I came up through the beginnings of, I went to Stanford. I was part of the beginnings of Silicon Valley, and people talk about tech. Well, 4 of the biggest tech innovations were solar photovoltaic cells. These were all happening in California in the 1970s. Solar panels, modern wind turbines, electric vehicles, and energy efficiency of the massive improvement in all of these different machines and devices. And so the green savings creates the capital to grow the green opportunities. And then you have the green talent, meaning that in order to make this transition, you need to invest in people and their new skills and in places, transforming places. And of course, that's what sustainable innovation zones are all about. So this model allows for good growth, green growth, and that's what we need because, keep in mind in a lot of the, billions of people around the world are still very poor. So we need to work very hard to raise their standard of living so they have decent life and quality of life, and to do that sustainably without increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And this is the way to do it.
Of course. Yeah, I think that is very important. One of the main challenges definitely I see is that the mind frame of people sometimes, as you said, it's like growth and green do not go together, and it's completely the other way around. So just to kind of hammer this point a little bit more, definitely changing that mindset is very important. So if you have any examples, any ideas, tips, advices to help people visualize a greener future, that would be great if you can give us any.
Well, like I say, you have I talked about California. I was there at the beginning of the change. That's my favorite example. But if you look at Germany and Denmark, Scandinavia, you see the same thing. They have grown businesses, jobs, and incomes by becoming more sustainable, not less. And there are other places, you can look, Singapore and, various places in East Asia and in other places in North America and so forth. So in the global north, we have some really good examples that's already proven that it works. Think of a place like Freiburg in Germany and so forth. But but in the global south, where we are, we don't yet have any really strong examples. And that's why why we made this commitment to come to Porto Alegre and to try and spread the sustainable innovation zone starting through Latin America to show that the same principles work just as well and maybe better because in the global south, people haven't done as many bad things, and so you can leapfrog into the future more easily and grow in the good way. In U.S., it's harder because we made so many horrible mistakes. We have to retrofit a lot of things that, like zillions of highways and cars that cost a lot of money to change that pattern. So places that haven't gone as far along with the old model or maybe have a competitive advantage for doing it the right way.
Absolutely. And I think I would like to add that the fact that you mentioned leapfrogging, I think we've talked about this before, the idea that, for example, in Panama, cell phone penetration leapfrogged ahead of landlines.
Yes.
So it's a really good example of how when an old sort of technology has not taken wholesale the entire 100% of the market, a newer, more innovative, more friendlier or even more convenient way of doing things will take the head, much faster. So I think that definitely applies to the fact that you're saying that, the developing world is very, susceptible to these kinds of, entrepreneurship, innovation sorts.
Yeah, and in fact, I remember, in the late 90s, a guy who was from the telecom industry was a friend of mine. He wrote this book, and at that time, there were more landlines in Manhattan than in all of sub-Saharan Africa.
That's crazy. What's the name?
Yeah, what happened in the 2 decades since then in Africa? They said, we don't need landlines. Let's just go straight to mobile phones. So that's a great leapfrogging example,
Right.
Yeah, I find this concept of leapfrogging very hopeful. That there are a lot of countries that, of course, maybe people feel left behind or feel like they don't have the capacity, the resources to match what is happening in the developed world. And it's completely the other way around. Leapfrog is a very hopeful concept in the sense that you don't have to catch up. There are many things that are
there's less to undo.
Exactly.
Yeah, so you're in a better position to jump ahead.
Exactly.
And that's part of it. That's why I think in the sustainable innovation zone ideas, we put these we call the 6 elements together: innovation and technology, entrepreneurship and startups, sustainability and resource efficiency, creativity and collaboration, participatory community management, and business-friendly environment. And that's really what the opportunity is, to show that by linking sustainability with the advanced technology, then that's where the leapfrog idea comes into effect. You can jump ahead into the future, and with more renewable resources, with more recycling and reuse, and be a stronger, more competitive economy as you're becoming greener.
Absolutely.
And I think that it's interesting you mentioned the 4 greens before this, talking about the idea of bringing in entrepreneurs to innovate, to sort of like propose change and propose these new products and services. How do you think the developing world could start fostering a more entrepreneur-friendly environment?
Well, the interesting thing is that I think it's a huge international social movement among your generation, in that in the same way, I was part of the 60s generation of, social protests and all that. And I would say, at that time, the main idea was kind of, I guess you could say, social entrepreneurship, creating community-based organizations and nonprofits as a way of building a kind of an alternative future. Now, I think in your generation, it's more mainstream, like, okay, for-profit businesses, and everybody's really excited about the sort of the Silicon Valley model, because it's so different from the kind of bureaucratic, top-down, unequal societies, that we're all so familiar with, and it also gets away from politics and more into kind of direct action, that people can do on their own. So basically, we said, let's take all that energy and all that enthusiasm and just link it more to sustainability. So it's innovation for sustainability, technology for sustainability, entrepreneurship startups for sustainability, and that's that's really what this movement is about. And you have, I would say, on the one hand, we certainly can see it in Porto Alegre. You have lots of startup hubs and co-working spaces and all these kinds of institutions and activities. The difficulty is that there's not enough capital, venture capital or other kind of financing to really support those activities. There's not enough governmental support in terms of the right kind of laws and regulations and policies, particularly once you inside universities, it's good, but then once you try and move from incubators into competing in business, it's more challenging. The demand isn't always there, but this is where one of the ways the sustainable innovation zones can help, because it helps generate more collective demand. When we had green drinks, we were always featuring local businesses to try and help them get more customers, and even experiment with the idea of having some kind of, collective green discounts and so forth. But that's one of the challenges, is to have the tech parks and those kind of activities be focused on being sustainable and green, and on having, in general, the entrepreneurship be much more supported by by banks and financial institutions, by government, by the mainstream business, to see that this is the future. This is how cities and countries in the developing world can thrive and succeed.
Absolutely. I think, innovation, entrepreneurship, individuals working together and promoting ideas is very good. But as you mentioned, you need a little bit more backing, especially by governments, which are a little bit slower, tend to be slower. So I just wanted to ask, perhaps to shift the conversation a little bit. First of all, what are the differences? You have such an amazing career working in so many different places. Now you're working in Brazil. What are the main differences you see, if you see any differences, in working in public policy between the United States, Europe, now Brazil? If you have any insights into that, that would be super interesting.
Well, one thing in particular, and because this was even, when we started GUD, we were in Europe for 4 years. We had the main headquarters in Prague, which was kind of a cool place to be. And then we also had the office in London and in Barcelona. And the interesting thing about having grown up in the U.S. is that the civil society, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote a book about this, all the way in the 19th century. Civil society, because the whole idea of the U.S. was weak government, and that meant strong civil society. So you have a whole tradition that I grew up in Chicago, in the San Francisco Bay Area, of people getting together to not only advocate for change, but actually do it themselves. And even in European Union, that's a very alien concept. It's still, at least 20 years ago when we started there, it was like either the government does it or nobody does it, or maybe sometimes corporations do it. But the idea that grassroots citizens can take on that responsibility commitment was rare. Now it's changing for the better, and I think it's same here in Brazil. I mean, one of the things that was interesting, if you look at Porto Alegre, where there's very active politics, citizen, politics. There are civic organizations that do things in terms of provide services or social charity and so forth. But the idea that when the state government said, we're not going to do Lisboa, and then when we said, we'll do it, people thought that was like totally crazy. That was like, there's no way that could possibly work. And nobody had seen it done before, and but it did work. And I think that changed a lot of things. I always say, like, when in the first year of Lisboa, we did this huge World Environment Day festival. We had 500 people, and it was like the only event, for that week. Maybe the first time ever there'd been an event like that. Now, last year there were like dozens of events all over, and so the idea that people can organize not just to protest and advocate for change, but to really try and do it themselves. That's, I think, one. I know there are a lot of bad things about the U.S. and particularly with the current president. I'm beyond embarrassed. I'm ashamed. But this one thing is a good thing that I think in countries like Panama and Brazil could learn more from and do more of, to encourage citizen collaborative action, with the blessing of government, support of government, but outside of government to get to make change.
Yeah, that is very interesting. There are a couple questions here that I might, to summarize this point, squeeze them together, because one person is asking, how do you implement this sustainability ideas that work in some cities, but then how you bring them to a particular cultural, a different culture, a different government, different set of people and skills and abilities and all that. How do you kind of build that? And another person is asking, what are the policies to implement or to support the ecosystem that brings forward sustainable innovation zones? So maybe I can ask you to maybe mix those two together. Okay. If you had a recipe to build in sustainable innovation zones in terms of what is necessary, what would your ingredients be?
Well, both great questions. On the first one, I mean, the key is that, and I've been, all the work I've done all my life and all the work GOD does, it's always custom designed, and built from the bottom up by people. And we have this saying, treating people and communities as assets. So those are your biggest assets, And so what works best is to, in each place is not, if you think of the Sustainable Innovation Zones idea, it's just kind of a framework for action. But then what you actually do and how you do it, every place is different. It's based on the, what makes that place special in terms of the physicality, the culture, the economy, how people think and how they work together. And so that, I think, answers the first part, is that every place that does this custom designs for themselves locally how to do it best. And now, how can you get more support? I think one would be to maybe have some resources available for people that want to organize zones. So they don't, we as you guys know, you started out the same way. We had lots of people power, but we certainly could have used more financial support. That's one thing governments could do. Another thing would be then to be a partner in helping to promote the policies. For example, we're trying to do a lot on solar energy, and now the government in Brazil made it harder, and more costly to do solar rather than easier and cheaper. And so having a partnership where the governments are willing to learn from what the sustainable innovation movements are doing, and then create laws and regulations and tax structures and so forth that are more supportive of that, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Maybe to start talking about a couple of things different, but what is the role of universities in all of this? Yeah.
The university role is huge. I mean, one of the reasons that we picked Porto Alegre, because it's kind of like, I make the analogy in the U.S., it's kind of like Boston or San Francisco, a relatively small city that has a huge university population. There are like three of the top, the Federal University where I teach is one of the top 5 universities in Brazil, but we have 2 other Catholic universities that are among the top 30 in Brazil, and there's even more. So Porto Alegre has both a huge current population of university professors and students, and a highly educated population of university graduates. And so that's vital because in making these changes for the future requires a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise, a wide variety of different skills, advanced and specialized skills. So the universities should be playing a major role, and we need them to do so. Like I said, we were fortunate in this case that over the past 5 years, we got the Federal University here to take on, starting from ZISPOA, take on the whole idea of sustainable innovation as a major commitment of what the university does as an institution, what professors teach, and what students study. And we were able to have, through a lot of great professors, to have a lot of classes doing work as part of their educational process. Students get to work on ZISPOA-related projects, both research and action, collectively, in groups and classes, as well as individually if people are doing like a thesis or something. And so I think that it's in our model, wherever we're talking with people about doing a zone, we always say connect with universities because it's a great resource. And the nice thing is it's a resource you don't have to pay for, that's already being paid for. So if you can get the faculty and the students actively involved, then that's a lot of people power and brain power to use that people are doing for their own careers, for their own educational and research purposes that you don't have to pay them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. One big limitation we have maybe in Panama and other places in the region is that there is not a lot of investment into scientific research. There's not a lot of financing. It is something that is perhaps a little bit difficult to do. And we are, it seems, in a very pivotal moment in terms of education for several reasons. One is something that was kind of happening before, which is that maybe universities have to invent themselves to really provide the tools that people need for future skills. And also now we're in this global situation where things are changing very quickly. So how do you think universities should think about all of these changes, and also achieving the financing that they need as well?
Well, one way to do it would be, I guess the true part of it is to kind of educate people to make the argument for why it's so important. And I think there's two arguments to make. First off, that if you think about the Sustainable Development Goals or the Paris Climate Agreement, the only way to achieve that is for universities and higher education institutions, both in education and research, to play a major role. So that's one argument for why they need more resources, because they're so valuable in terms of the overall contribution to society. And then along the same lines, if you want to have a modern, productive, competitive economy, that is innovative and so forth, that's generating the businesses and jobs that will succeed in the 21st century, again, universities must play a major role in that. And so it's an investment in having a stronger economy and higher quality of life, and in having a more sustainable society. So I guess that would be to make that link. That's where, by the way, for universities, as was done here, to be active players in the ZIS movement and Sustainable Innovation Zone is one of the ways for universities to show how important their role is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Marc, you went to some amazing universities. You studied in Stanford. You attended London School of Economics. You worked at Columbia for a while. You've had such an amazing life. I mean, you grew up in Chicago, then you went to Silicon Valley right when it was starting to boom. There was social movements, Vietnam War, so many things happening, including the environmental movement. Can you maybe give us, I don't know, your perspective on all of this? Because we are millennials. You have seen all of these changes occur, and you have the perspective of a little bit more background. Where do you see things going, taking account of all these different things that have happened so fast?
Well, one thing I want to say, I know you mentioned Stanford, which of course was the kind of the centerpiece of the information technology revolution that from the 60s, began in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But please, I want to give a shout out also to where I went to graduate school of University of California, Berkeley, because Berkeley was the leader on what I talked about earlier about on the kind of renewable energy efficiency, sustainability revolution. It was kind of the intellectual center for California and in some ways for the world. And that was where we did back in the late 1970s at the University of California, Berkeley, for the city of Berkeley, the first sustainable economic development strategy, where we said the city would grow through investing and supporting energy efficiency and renewable energy, which, was a kind of a touchstone for a lot of work I did later in my life. So I guess, now I'm 70 years old, and maybe the couple things to say. One is that, these movements come along in different ways in different generations. I was very lucky to be, I was a hippie and, and all of that, and a radical anti-war protester, et cetera, et cetera. But so I feel very blessed, civil rights marcher, and so I feel very fortunate to have been part of a generational movement that really created lots of changes that we're all benefiting from. And I think it's the same thing now. I see that in your generation in a whole new way. And so there's the hope that, what goes around comes around, and we're in the next wave of it. And the other thing, I guess, to say from having started as an activist when I was young and now being old, is that things do change. I think it was Martin Luther King say the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And so even for me to talk about, as I did in the beginning, what we started in California in the 1970s, it worked. Took a long time, or even NOMA, which was a project I did in Washington D.C. that is one of the models for sustainable innovation zones that started 23 years ago. Now it's an absolute obvious success. It's the greenest place in the city and one of the most economically dynamic places in the city. But after 5 years, which is how long we've been doing this BOA, it wasn't obvious that NOMA was going to succeed the way that it did. So that's important to keep in mind, that change happens, but it takes a long time. So you have to have faith. It helps if you're older, you have the experience that that it works. But the good news about that I would really like about this sort of ZIS movement is that it's a way of kind of getting the benefit of both, that because you can bring people together in a very fun, enjoyable, interesting, educational, enthusiastic, energetic ways to take collaborative action now. So you have in your hands that you can do something now, knowing that it's going to change the future. It's not going to change the future overnight, but it's the steps that will change it. So so that's what I like about it. It's very immediate oriented, something active you can do now, but ultimately it's going to have a big impact on where the future goes.
Yeah, definitely. Something that comes to mind immediately is that, I did the math, and I think you were about 20 when we reached the moon in 1969, around that time. And
Yeah,
I imagine that must have been 19.
Yeah.
Perfect timing. I mean, that must have been super inspiring, such an amazing human achievement. And it provided that perspective of looking at the earth from outside and seeing how delicate it can be. Is there anything that inspires you in some similar way this times that maybe can inspire other people as well?
Well, in a way, because one of the, after the moon landing, then we, in the 1970s, we got Stuart Brand and the Whole Earth Catalog, right? Which I remember very well. And that the name itself, the whole idea of the whole Earth, which was a foundation of GUD, that, we said we're one world and everybody has much more in common than the differences between us. So there was like it was like a different way of thinking, particularly for ecology, the notion that it was just this planet, and you could even see it, what it looked like from far away. And we were small little living creatures on it in a unity with all the other living creatures in a way that people hadn't thought of before. So I think now, I don't know if there's I would say maybe two things. One is, and COVID has accelerated, here we're doing this webinar now, that when you look at these telecommunication platforms, I think that has changed the world. Look at what happened with this video of, which is tragic, of George Floyd being killed by the police, which happens thousands of times every day all over the world. There are police kill people, but the fact that everybody in the whole world got to watch it happen in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, it brought people together in a way that you haven't seen before. GUD, when we started 20 years ago, we used to have to go to international meetings. Now we have Zoom meetings. Everybody's sitting at home. So I think that's one thing. The telecommunications technology has brought about the opportunity for a new consciousness, the way the moon landing did. And the other thing is, I think there's if you think of, again, the Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Climate Agreement, both of which happened the same year in 2015, and both of which GUD was involved from the very beginning to, help enable those things to happen. So that's a new way of thinking that I think is a kind of a platform for the future, that that each of us individually has a joint responsibility for the future of the whole world. Like when I was 19, we didn't have that thinking. So that's a change that's happening now. I think that's a really good change.
Yeah, definitely. I have just a quick questions here. People want to know maybe a bit more concisely, if someone asks if you can just in one sentence define sustainability or concisely define sustainable systems, perhaps in your role as an academic, if you can bring them just a simple phrase for them to take home.
Well, the classic definition of I guess that came from the Brundtland Commission. When I was an activist in the 70s, we didn't even have this term. We had environmental quality, appropriate technology, and alternative energy, meaning alternative to fossil fuels. So sustainable came later, and the idea of sustainable, which really came from another meaning that sustainable is something that can last a long time. You know, it's unsustainable if it doesn't last, sustainable if it is. So basically it was saying that we needed to be able to deal with the needs of the present without ruining the needs of the future. So that we needed to figure out a way to be healthy and to thrive now and continue to be healthy and thrive for thousands of years into the future. So that was the whole sustainable idea, that we had to somehow use resources in ways that made them still available for thousands of years to come rather than running out of them, that enabled ecosystems to function well as they've been doing for thousands of years, to continue to function well for thousands of years in the future without destroying them. So that's kind of the sustainability idea in terms of why having a relationship to the natural and the built environment that will last. You know, if you look at just at climate change, we're up against now when people first became aware of climate change in the 1980s, it seemed like, I remember very well, a very abstract and distant thing. And of course we were going to deal with it and solve it. We had plenty of time to do that. And now here, think of it, when they did the Kyoto Protocol, they said, okay, we need to get 20% below 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Now we're 20% above 1990 levels. So we're 40% in the wrong direction. And because of that, we're still going up. Not at the moment because of COVID, but in general, yes. And what does that mean? Now the UN IPCC said by 2030, it's only a decade from now, we may be crossing the threshold in irrevocable, massive damage that can't be undone. So that is the example of being unsustainable. And so what's the alternative? Having renewable energy, conserving energy, using it much more efficiently, so that we have it for centuries into the future without damaging the ecosystem, so we can still breathe air and not self-destruct. That's sustainability.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's a great answer. And I just want to add real quick. I think that talking back to the point that when we landed on the moon and everything, making the argument that once we were out there looking at the Earth from the outside, people started realizing, like, okay, so it's like you said, like, this is our home. There are basically no boundaries. We're just a little speck in this whole existence, and that basically spawned, I guess, like the NOAA, the North Oceanic, I guess the Weather Administration, basically. The EPA was born right there, the Environmental Protection Agency, and all these things were spawned, from the moment that we took a second to look back and, look at the big picture. And I just think that could have sort of an echo seeing right now during the COVID pandemic, the fact that we stopped breathing for I guess a month or so, or 2 months or 3 months or whatever. Thank you for the mic, Pepe. We stopped, rushing so quickly for the last months during the quarantine. And we are seeing immediate results. We're seeing how animals are going back to the to their typical environments, and people throwing this phrase around like we were the virus or whatever. But trying to go a little beyond that, maybe this could be the sort of wake up call that we start to take action and say, like, okay, we have to create these these new regulations, better institutions or even newer institutions that start taking care of these things that we clearly need to pay attention to. So I just wanted to know your opinion. Like, do you think this could be mirrored?
Yeah, I know. This is a really inflection point moment. I think for one thing, and this was one of the problems that we've been running into in climate change, is that even though, if you look at the 10,000 years of, human civilization, for the most part, people have not really been sustainable in their thinking and the way they related to nature. It's just that their ecological footprint was very small. So they really couldn't do that much damage. In the worst case scenario, where they ruined a place altogether, they just moved to some other place. This is why Easter Island was famous, because they were in the ocean in the middle of nowhere. So when they ruined the place, they had no place to go to. But normally people would just move. But now in this Anthropocene, once we began burning fossil fuels to run machines, we discovered, to our horror, that we're doing massive damage to the entire global ecosystem. So there's no escaping it. And part of the problem is that people had this notion that human beings were more powerful than nature. We could control nature, either in a bad way, or even in the notion that there's this biblical notion that we're stewards of nature. We should take care of it. But still, from there is the idea that we're in control.
Or at least of a separate, nature and humanity are two separate entities, kind of thing.
Exactly. And whereas in fact, we're a part of nature. We're a living organism, just like every other living organism. And all living organisms need to conform to how the nature functions. And so I think human beings kind of lost track of that. And in a way, the COVID-19 has been this gigantic wake-up call. Like, here's this weird little virus, another living organism that came out of nowhere, that is eating us up, and we don't have any control over it. And the only way to get control is to become much more sustainable. And so, number one, we're experiencing in the need to shut down to avoid getting infected, lots of good impacts like cleaner air and so forth, that people are like amazed to experience again, or no traffic. But also the understanding that if we're going to then survive, be more sustainable and longer term into the future, maybe we have to rethink how we do things. And lastly, and here's maybe the best news, is that for all of my life, from the time I grew up in Chicago, where, that was the old way of thinking, that, if you were polluting the air and water, that was a good thing if it was creating a lot of jobs. That was the mindset that I grew up with before I went to California and began to change in college. But as I talked about, so this economic fear that gets in the way of environmental sustainability may now be changing, because in order to recover from COVID, I think people are realizing we need to become more sustainable. And what does recovery mean? It means economic recovery. So now, for the first time, economic fear that has been working against us my whole lifetime may now be working in our favor, you say, because people are afraid if they don't change, if they don't become more sustainable, we won't have a good economy again. And that's right. So the more people are recognizing that, the more that gives an opportunity for our work to advance. And this is why sustainable innovation zones can be so important, because these are areas where you can experiment in a less risky way with making changes to show people better ways of doing things.
Absolutely. And, I just want to add to that the fact that, it's not that the Earth is going to blow up or anything, because that's absolutely not true. Climate change, the only thing that it will really bring is hardship for us as human beings. It's not that life will persist, probably, and Earth will still be here millions of years after we're gone. So I guess we have to start thinking about it less in a way that we're just destroying trees and polluting the ocean or whatever. We're really just destroying our own well-being while we're here.
Absolutely. In fact, when one of the think about endangered species or all the massive extinctions that have been happening because of our behavior, and now we have to face the possibility that we're going to be extinct. So that's why I used to say, when people say, "Oh, we have to worry about the Earth," no, the Earth will take care of itself. The Earth is going to be here, but human beings may not be part of it if we don't change. So that's, to me, that's one of the important things, is this change in consciousness, for us to recognize that we are part of nature, just like birds or fish, or trees or anything.
Which we depend on too.
Yeah. Those are our, I go in the park every day. I run around the park, but I also go and pray in the park, and I thank the water in the lake and the trees, that those are our friends, those are our cousins, we're no different than them. And the way that they support us, we also need to support them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I can definitely tell that you went to college in California.
Remember, I was a hippie.
Okay. Yeah. We're a little bit over the hour, so just to maybe wrap this up. If you can provide, perhaps, I was going to ask you what were your favorite books, but also.
I brought 3 to show. It was hard, but these are 3 that I want to recommend. I don't know if so. This one, Confessions of a Radical Industrialist by Ray Anderson, is really inspiring, because this is a guy who
Sorry, is this the spear to the chest guy from Interface, the rug?
Yeah, Interface, exactly. Yeah, here's a guy who, and this book tells the story. Came out right before he died in 2009. The 15-year story of how he took this big industrial company that he had founded and built, and made it very green. And the beautiful part of the story is that as they made it very green, they also got more successful. They saved millions reducing waste. Their market share went up. Their revenues went up. Their profits went up. So they really did well by doing good in a very heavy industrial company that you wouldn't have thought it would be possible. And so it's so inspiring. It's very detailed story. He's an engineer. He tells how they did it step by step. And it's really totally inspiring, because what Interface did, any business could do, any community can do, So that was number 1. Number 2, Climate of Hope by Michael Bloomberg and Carl Pope, because it's really one, there's zillions of books about climate change, but this is one of the well-written, easy to read, not too long, not too academic, very action-oriented, practical-oriented. Carl Pope was the head of the Sierra Club in the U.S., and of course, you all know who Bloomberg is. So, and then one that I just thought to kind of inspire people, especially since you guys are urbanists, Street Fight by Jeanette Sadikan, it's all about in New York, how they change people's thinking about, like, closing streets and doing bike lanes, and a whole bunch of changes in urban planning and development to make it more sustainable and improve the quality of life, and how hard it was to do it because it was such radically different thinking. But as they succeeded, then they showed not only did people like it a lot, but it was also really good for the economy.
Very nice, very nice. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Okay.
Pepe, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely have to read those books. So I think we can wrap things up. I'm sorry if I left some questions out. I don't want to extend too long. Thank you very much, Marc. For us, you are an inspiration. And perhaps just if you want to say any last words, if you want to tell people where they can find you, if you're on Twitter or any of that, if you have any books yourself, that kind of thing. Any last words, please, it's your stage.
Well, please visit, we have a GUD Global Development. We have two websites. One is globalurban.org, which was the one we started 19 years ago. At the end of last year, we archived that. So it's got tons of downloadable PDF files and tons of information, even though we're not updating it anymore, but it's really informative, useful. And then we have a new site this year that you guys are on, your video, that's globalurban.net. That's all about the sustainable innovation zones in Porto Alegre, Panama City, in Santo Angelo here in London, and others that we're working on. So please visit those, everyone, to get more information. You can contact me. It's Marc Weiss, MarcWeiss, at globalurban.org if you want to send me an email. And the main thing, let me just say, is that, get involved. Get involved with ACTA would be the best if you're, right there in Panama City. But, get together with friends and colleagues and fellow students and coworkers and family and neighbors and all that, and do things together. That's the most important thing, and that makes all the difference. That's what makes life fun to live, and what makes it possible, I think, for all of us to really have a sustainable future. And
Awesome.
And again, I started with this, I'll end with this. Thank you guys for your whole team for what you're doing. You're an inspiration to me, and please keep it up.
Thank you.
Only,
Thank you.
Emulating you and following your steps, Marc. So thank you very much to you.
All right.
Exactly. Thanks for letting us be part of, your larger scheme of things, and trusting us with your actions and your words. I guess we're gonna want to have this sort of conversation, or this sort of segment more often. We will bring other guests from your network, from GUD. We will probably have you again as well, because we know you have a lot to say, not only on this topic, but on more personal, interesting things. And yeah, particularly, obviously, the sustainable innovation zones. So once again, thank you for your time.
Forgive me, I forgot. On July, the UN Habitat, they have this World Urban Campaign, and they have Urban Thinkers campuses. We had one in Porto Alegre in 2017. We had one in December 2019 where we showed the video that you guys made. But now that because of COVID-19, they've got virtual online Urban Thinkers campuses, and GUD is going to do one on July 28th. Jose, you'll be one of the speakers talking about ACTA. So if you let people know about that, they'll be able to watch that. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much, Marc. Thank you very much to everybody who listened to this. And we will see each other very soon with another talk that we do here in ACTA. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Bye-bye. Be safe. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.